16 years ago, on a golden June evening in Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, three young friends, Mark Chen, Daniel Rodriguez, and Emily Patterson, ages 25 to 28, set out for what should have been a routine 3-hour hike. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an empty SUV and a community consumed by questions. Investigators initially suspected a tragic wilderness accident, as the rugged terrain had claimed hikers before. But when searchers found scattered belongings miles from any trail, darker possibilities emerged. For years, Emily's mother kept a porch light burning every single night, a beacon of hope, piercing the mountain darkness. Then, 4 years later, when rangers heard an eerie metallic echo deep in Bear Creek Canyon, a single overlooked detail from 2008 would finally expose a truth so shocking it would forever change how this tight-knit town looked at its neighbors. Before we uncover this chilling story, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more in-depth true crime investigations. The summer evening of June 14, 2008, painted the Bitterroot Mountains in shades of amber and rose. The air hung thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, as three university friends gathered at the Lost Horse Trailhead, 30 miles southeast of Missoula. The parking area, nothing more than a gravel clearing, carved from dense forest, offered no hint of the tragedy about to unfold. Mark Chen adjusted his well-worn hiking boots one final time. At 27, he was the geology graduate student who could identify rock formations from memory and navigate by stars alone. His weathered field notebook, filled with sketches of mineral deposits and topographical observations, lay open on his SUV's dashboard. Mark had spent countless weekends exploring these mountains, documenting their secrets for his master's thesis on glacial formations.
Daniel Rodriguez,
25 and fresh from completing his computer science degree, checked his GPS device, a bulky unit that seemed cutting-edge in 2008 but would appear primitive by today's standards. He was the group's tech-savvy navigator, always carrying backup batteries and emergency equipment. Daniel's methodical nature had saved them from getting lost on previous adventures, and his friends trusted his careful route planning implicitly. Emily Patterson, 28, secured her auburn hair beneath a sun-faded baseball cap. As a nursing student preparing for her final clinical rotations, she carried the group's first aid kit and emergency supply. Her nurturing instincts extended beyond the classroom. She was the one who remembered to pack extra water and trail mix, who checked that everyone had proper layers for temperature changes. The trio had been inseparable since meeting in a mountaineering club 3 years earlier. Their shared love for Montana's wilderness had forged a bond deeper than casual friendship. They'd conquered dozens of peaks together, weathered unexpected storms, and celebrated sunrise views that most people only see in photographs. Their plan for that evening seemed unremarkable: a familiar loop trail through Bear Creek Canyon that would take them past a series of small waterfalls before circling back to the parking area. The route, marked as moderate difficulty on Forest Service maps, typically took experienced hikers 3 hours to complete. They'd hiked it twice before without incident. "We'll be back before dark," Emily promised during her final phone call home at 6:15 p.m. Her mother, Carol Patterson, would later replay those words in her mind thousands of times. The conversation had been brief, Emily excitedly describing the perfect weather and their plans to photograph the waterfalls in golden hour lighting. Mark's father received a similar call around the same time. "Just a quick hike, Dad. Daniel wants to test his new GPS before our big trip next month." The big trip was a week-long backcountry expedition to Glacier National Park that the three had been planning since spring. As they shouldered their day packs and headed toward the trailhead marker, other evening hikers were finishing their adventures and returning to their vehicles. The parking area, which could accommodate perhaps 20 cars, held only a handful of vehicles. A middle-aged couple from California nodded in greeting as they loaded their gear, commenting on the beautiful evening light. The trail began innocuously enough, a well-maintained path, winding through towering ponderosa pines and Douglas firs. Forest Service markers appeared every half-mile, and the sound of Bear Creek provided constant companionship for hikers. Wildlife in the area included deer, elk, and occasionally black bears, though encounters were rare and typically harmless. What the three friends couldn't have known was that their routine evening hike would become the last confirmed sighting of them alive. Security cameras were non-existent in the remote area, and cell phone coverage was spotty at best. The nearest ranger station sat 15 miles away, and the closest hospital was back in Missoula. As the sun began its descent behind the western ridgeline, painting the forest in deeper shadows, Mark, Daniel, and Emily followed the familiar trail deeper into Bear Creek Canyon. Their voices and laughter would have echoed off the canyon walls initially, before being swallowed by the vast wilderness surrounding them. By 9:30 p.m., when they should have completed their loop and returned to the parking area, their white Honda Pilot sat alone beneath the darkening sky. The temperature was dropping toward the predicted overnight low of 42 degrees, cool but not dangerous for properly equipped hikers. At 10 p.m., when Emily missed her promised check-in call, her mother began to worry. By 11 p.m., that worry had transformed into something deeper and more urgent. Carol Patterson tried calling Emily's cell phone repeatedly, but each attempt went straight to voicemail. The cheerful recorded message, "Hi, you've reached Emily. Leave a message and I'll call you back," would haunt her dreams for years to come. By midnight, when the three friends still hadn't returned to their vehicle or contacted anyone, their routine evening hike had officially become something much more sinister. Dawn crept across the Bitterroot Mountains on June 15th, with deceptive tranquility. The morning air carried a crisp bite that promised another beautiful day, but the empty Honda Pilot at Lost Horse Trailhead told a different story. Park Rangers Gary Mueller and Jennifer Walsh arrived at 6:47 a.m., responding to Carol Patterson's frantic overnight calls to the sheriff's department. The SUV sat exactly where the three friends had parked it 12 hours earlier, but something felt immediately wrong. Mueller, a 20-year veteran of mountain rescues, approached the vehicle with growing unease. The doors were locked, windows rolled up, and no signs of forced entry or struggle were visible. Through the tinted glass, he could see personal belongings scattered across the seats and floor. "Vehicle's secure," Mueller radioed to dispatch, "but something's not adding up here." Using emergency protocols, Rangers contacted the registered owner's emergency contact information. Within minutes, they had Mark Chen's father on the line. The conversation was brief but decisive. Mark, Daniel, and Emily had planned to return by 9 p.m. the previous evening. None of them had alternative transportation or backup plans. Jennifer Walsh circled the SUV methodically, photographing everything with her digital camera. The license plate, vehicle identification number, and condition were all documented. What struck her most was the normalcy of the scene. No broken glass, no blood, no obvious signs of distress. It looked as though the three friends had simply walked away from their vehicle and vanished. By 8:15 a.m., the parking area had transformed into an impromptu command center. Sheriff Deputy Thomas Bradley arrived with additional personnel, followed by the first wave of increasingly frantic family members. Carol Patterson's hands shook as she provided a spare key to Emily's apartment, hoping against hope that somehow the three had returned there safely. Opening the Honda Pilot revealed more questions than answers. The friends' wallets, cell phones, and car keys were absent, suggesting they had taken them on the hike, but water bottles, extra snacks, and Daniel's backup GPS batteries remained in the vehicle. Most puzzling was Emily's purse, left behind despite containing her driver's license and credit cards. They were experienced hikers. Mark's father, David Chen, explained to Deputy Bradley, "Mark never went anywhere without telling me his exact route and expected return time. This isn't like them." The initial search began immediately. Two teams of rangers entered the trail system from opposite directions, hoping to encounter the missing hikers somewhere along the loop. The Bear Creek Trail was familiar territory, a moderate 4.2-mile circuit that most fit adults could complete in under 4 hours. Ranger Mueller took the clockwise route, following the same path the three friends would have taken the previous evening. The trail showed clear signs of recent foot traffic, but determining which prints belonged to the missing hikers proved impossible on the hard-packed dirt surface. As Mueller progressed deeper into the canyon, he found the first concrete evidence of the group's presence. Approximately 1.3 miles from the trailhead, wedged between two granite boulders, lay a granola bar wrapper with Emily's fingerprints, though this wouldn't be confirmed until forensic analysis days later. The discovery energized the search teams. If the friends had made it this far, they were following their planned route. But as rangers continued along the trail, the evidence trail went cold. No more food wrappers, no footprints in the soft earth near the creek, no broken branches, suggesting someone had left the main path. By noon, with temperatures climbing toward 80 degrees, additional resources arrived. The Missoula County Search and Rescue Team deployed with trained bloodhounds, capable of tracking human scent across miles of wilderness. The dogs immediately picked up multiple scent trails around the parking area, not surprising given the number of hikers who used the trailhead regularly. The bloodhounds followed one particularly strong scent trail for nearly 2 miles before losing it completely at a rocky creek crossing. The lead handler, Maria Santos, had worked with her German Shepherd, Rex, for 8 years, and had never seen him lose a trail so abruptly. "It's like they just vanished into thin air," Santos reported to the command post. "Rex was following something definite, then nothing. I've never seen anything quite like it." As afternoon shadows began lengthening, helicopter support arrived from the Montana Highway Patrol. Pilot Captain James Morrison flew grid patterns over the dense forest, searching for any signs of the missing hikers, bright clothing, makeshift shelters, or signals for help. From the air, the wilderness revealed its true vastness. The dense canopy stretched for miles in every direction, broken only by occasional clearings, and the silver thread of Bear Creek winding through the canyon. Morrison had participated in dozens of mountain rescues, but the complete absence of any trace was unusual and deeply troubling. By 6 p.m., as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, more than 40 searchers had combed the area without finding additional clues. The three friends had seemingly walked into the Montana wilderness and disappeared completely, leaving behind only an empty SUV and increasingly desperate families. The first day of searching was ending with more questions than answers, and everyone involved sensed this was just the beginning of a much longer and more complicated ordeal. The morning of June 16th brought an expanded search operation that transformed the quiet Lost Horse trailhead into a sprawling command center. Sheriff Thomas Bradley had called in resources from 3 counties, turning what started as a routine missing persons case into one of the largest search operations in western Montana's recent history. The incident command post, established in the ranger station's main building, buzzed with activity as coordinators mapped search grids across detailed topographical charts. The wilderness area encompassed roughly 40 square miles of dense forest, steep ravines, and rocky outcroppings, terrain that could easily hide 3 people or conceal evidence of what had happened to them. Search and Rescue Coordinator Linda Martinez divided the area into manageable sectors, assigning teams based on their specific expertise. Ground crews would focus on trail systems and creek beds, while technical rescue specialists prepared to rappel into the deeper canyon areas where someone might have fallen or taken shelter. The bloodhound teams returned with additional dogs, hoping fresh scent articles from the missing hikers' homes would provide stronger trails to follow. Carol Patterson had brought one of Emily's favorite sweaters, unwashed, and still carrying her daughter's distinctive scent. Mark's father provided a pillowcase from his son's bed, while Daniel's sister contributed a pair of worn athletic socks. This time, the dogs produced more promising results. 3 separate German Shepherds independently followed similar scent trails that diverged from the main Bear Creek Trail approximately 2 miles from the trailhead. The trail led downhill toward a series of abandoned mining claims from the early 1900s, an area not marked on current hiking maps. "The scent is definitely human," reported canine handler Jim Stevens, whose dog Ranger had been following the trail for 40 minutes. "But it's fragmented, like they moved through here, then doubled back, then went a different direction entirely." The mining area presented new challenges for searchers. Decades of neglect had left behind hazardous mine shafts, unstable wooden structures, and rusted equipment scattered throughout the forest. County regulations required extreme caution when approaching these sites, slowing the search progress considerably. Technical rescue specialist Amanda Cole rappelled into 3 different mine shafts that morning, each descent requiring careful safety protocols and specialized equipment. Her powerful headlamp illuminated chambers that hadn't seen daylight in half a century, but revealed no signs of recent human presence. These shafts go down 30 to 50 feet, Cole radioed from the third location. Some have water at the bottom, others are bone dry. If someone fell in accidentally, we'd expect to see disturbed dirt or debris around the opening. I'm not seeing that. Meanwhile, helicopter pilot Captain Morrison expanded his aerial search to cover the mining district and surrounding wilderness. Flying at lower altitudes to improve visibility, he photographed potentially promising locations for ground teams to investigate later. The search dogs made another significant discovery around 2 p.m. Near an old mining camp's foundation, Ranger alerted on what appeared to be a piece of fabric caught on a rusty metal post. The material, bright blue synthetic fabric, matched the description of Daniel's hiking jacket. Evidence technician Sarah Walsh carefully collected the fabric sample, documenting its exact location with GPS coordinates and multiple photographs. The find energized the entire search operation, suggesting the three friends had indeed traveled beyond the main trail system into more remote terrain. This changes our search parameters significantly, Sheriff Bradley announced to assembled team leaders. If they made it this far from the main trail, they either knew about these mining sites or were following someone who did. The fabric discovery prompted a more intensive search of the immediate area. Additional ground teams combed through thick underbrush and around abandoned equipment, looking for more clothing, personal items, or signs of recent human activity. As afternoon temperatures climbed into the low 80s, searchers battled dense vegetation, steep terrain, and growing fatigue. The mining district's rough topography made progress slow and physically demanding, with teams needing frequent rest breaks and constant radio contact with the command post. Wildlife biologist Dr. Rebecca Turner, called in to assess potential animal encounters, provided sobering perspective on the region's predator population. While black bear attacks on humans were extremely rare, the mining area's isolation and available water sources made it attractive habitat for both bears and mountain lions. If there was a wildlife encounter, we'd typically expect to find more evidence, Dr. Turner explained to family members gathered at the command post. Disturbed vegetation, scattered belongings, or other signs of struggle. The absence of such evidence doesn't rule it out completely, but suggests other explanations might be more likely. As evening approached and search teams began returning to the command post, the day's efforts had produced tantalizing clues but no definitive answers. The fabric sample would require laboratory analysis to confirm its connection to Daniel's jacket, and the expanded search area had revealed just how vast and challenging the terrain really was. Family members maintained their vigil at the trailhead, refusing offers to return to more comfortable accommodations in town. Carol Patterson had set up a small camping chair beside the Honda Pilot, determined to be present when her daughter returned safely. The search would continue at first light, but everyone involved understood they were now looking at a much more complex and potentially dangerous situation than anyone had initially imagined. Word of the disappearance spread through the tight-knit communities surrounding the Bitterroot Mountains like wildfire. By June 17th, the third day of searching, local residents had transformed the crisis into a grassroots mobilization that showcased rural Montana's legendary spirit of neighborly support. The First Baptist Church of Hamilton opened its doors as an unofficial coordination center for civilian volunteers. Pastor Michael Warren, whose own teenage son had been rescued from these same mountains 5 years earlier, understood intimately what the families were experiencing. "We've all felt that terror," Pastor Warren announced from the pulpit during an emergency evening service. "When the mountains take someone we love, we don't rest until they come home. That's who we are out here." More than 200 community members attended the hastily organized vigil, filling the small church beyond capacity. Ranchers, shop owners, retired loggers, and college students sat shoulder to shoulder, united in their determination to support the search efforts. Local businesses immediately rallied to provide material support. Henderson's General Store donated cases of water and energy bars for search teams. Mountain Mike's Cafe prepared hundreds of sandwiches for volunteers. refusing any payment. The Bitterroot Valley Motel offered free rooms to visiting family members and out-of-town searchers. But the community response generated more than just material support. It produced dozens of potential leads that investigators had to carefully evaluate. The sheriff's office established a dedicated tip line that rang constantly as residents recalled seeing anything unusual in recent weeks. Martha Kellerman, who lived in a cabin 2 miles from the trailhead, called to report hearing voices in the forest around 10 p.m. on June 14th. It sounded like people calling to each other, she told Deputy Bradley. But that's not unusual. Hikers get turned around up there all the time, especially after dark. Her report prompted investigators to interview other residents in the scattered mountain communities. Robert Dutch Steinberg, a retired Forest Service employee who lived even closer to the search area, provided more specific information. I was checking my property lines around sunset that evening, Steinberg explained, pointing to locations on a detailed map. Heard what sounded like someone yelling for help, maybe a quarter-mile northeast of Bear Creek. Figured it was kids being kids, you know? Now I wish I'd gone to investigate. These witness accounts helped searchers refine their focus areas, but they also introduced troubling possibilities. If the missing hikers had been calling for help that evening, it suggested they were in distress, but still alive hours after they should have returned to their vehicle. The most promising lead came from an unexpected source. Casey Morrison, a local teenager who worked part-time at the ranger station, remembered encountering 3 hikers, matching the missing persons' descriptions earlier that week. It was Tuesday or Wednesday, Casey told investigators, consulting his work schedule to narrow down the time frame. They came in asking about the old mining trails, wanting to know if any were still accessible. I told them most were too dangerous, but they seemed really interested in the Bear Creek area. This information aligned with the fabric evidence found near the abandoned mining camp, suggesting the 3 friends had been planning to explore beyond the main trail system. But it also raised questions about their level of preparation for such an expedition. Local mining history expert Eleanor Hayes provided crucial context about the area's industrial past. There are at least a dozen major mine shafts within a 2-mile radius of Bear Creek, she explained to search coordinators. Most date back to the 1880s and 1890s, when this whole area was booming with gold and silver claims. Hayes' detailed knowledge proved invaluable for search planning. She provided hand-drawn maps showing the locations of known shafts, processing facilities, and abandoned camps that didn't appear on modern topographical surveys. The thing about old mining operations, Hayes warned, is that they're incredibly dangerous even for experienced cavers. Rotted timbers, poisonous gases, unstable rock formations. These sites have killed plenty of people over the years. As civilian search teams organized under the church's coordination, strict safety protocols had to be established. The mining district's hazards meant that only trained technical rescue personnel could safely investigate the most dangerous areas. Local rancher Tom Bradley, no relation to the sheriff, offered the use of his all-terrain vehicles to transport search teams across rough terrain. These mountains have been good to my family for 3 generations, Bradley said as he loaded ATVs onto trailers. Time to give something back. The community's response also attracted unwanted attention. Conspiracy theorists and amateur sleuths began arriving from out of state, drawn by internet discussions about the case. Some brought metal detectors and camping equipment, planning to conduct their own searches despite official warnings about the area's dangers. Sheriff Bradley found himself managing not just the official search operation, but also protecting legitimate search efforts from well-meaning, but potentially dangerous interference. As the evening of June 17th drew to a close, the expanded community involvement had generated dozens of leads, but no breakthrough discoveries. The missing hikers remained as elusive as ever, but their disappearance had revealed something profound about the character of rural Montana communities. Tomorrow would bring renewed searching with even more volunteers, but tonight brought only prayers, candlelight vigils, and the growing fear that 3 young lives might already be lost to the unforgiving wilderness. By late June 2008, the initial urgency surrounding the disappearance had settled into the grinding reality of a complex investigation hampered by technological limitations and the vast wilderness terrain. Lead investigator Detective Sarah Manning found herself coordinating a case that stretched resources across multiple agencies while producing frustratingly few concrete leads. The evidence locker at the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office contained a growing collection of items that might or might not be connected to the missing hikers. The blue fabric sample from the mining area was undergoing laboratory analysis, but results wouldn't be available for weeks due to the state crime lab's backlog. In 2008, DNA processing and comparison took significantly longer than today's rapid testing capabilities. Detective Manning spread crime scene photographs across her desk for the 100th time, searching for details that might have been overlooked. The images showed the abandoned Honda Pilot, the granola bar wrapper, the fabric caught on rusted mining equipment, and dozens of other potential evidence points. But connecting these scattered pieces into a coherent narrative remained elusive. The problem isn't finding evidence, Manning confided to her partner, Detective Rick Hawkins. It's interpreting what it means when we're dealing with 40 square miles of wilderness and 3 people who seem to have vanished completely. The investigation faced unique challenges that urban detectives rarely encountered. Cell phone records, typically crucial in missing persons cases, were largely useless due to the spotty coverage in the mountain region. The friends' phones had last connected to towers in Missoula before entering the dead zone around Bear Creek Canyon. Credit card and bank records showed no activity after June 14, suggesting the 3 hadn't left the area voluntarily. But without electronic transactions or surveillance cameras, investigators had to rely on witness accounts and physical evidence, both of which were proving frustratingly sparse. The mining district search had expanded to include nearly every accessible shaft and structure within a 5-mile radius of the main trail. Technical rescue teams had rappelled into 23 different locations, finding evidence of past human activity, but not recent enough to be connected to the missing hikers. Mining safety specialist Robert Chen, no relation to victim Mark Chen, provided disturbing context about the area's historical dangers. These old workers have claimed lives regularly since they were abandoned, he explained to investigators. Cave-ins, toxic gases, flooding during spring runoff. There are dozens of ways someone could disappear down there permanently. The possibility that the 3 friends had encountered a fatal accident in the mining area remained the leading theory, but proving it required finding remains or additional physical evidence. Each shaft search was methodical and time-consuming, requiring specialized equipment and extreme safety precautions. Wildlife encounters remained another possibility that investigators couldn't dismiss. The Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks Department provided historical data showing several documented black bear and mountain lion encounters in the region over the past decade. A defensive wildlife encounter could easily scatter personal belongings over a wide area, explained Game Warden Patricia Voss. Predators might drag significant distances from the initial encounter site, making discovery extremely difficult. But this theory also had problematic gaps. Experienced hikers like Mark, Daniel, and Emily would have carried bear spray and followed proper food storage protocols. Their backgrounds suggested they understood wilderness safety and would have avoided behaviors likely to provoke wildlife encounters. The investigation's most frustrating aspect was the sheer number of false leads generated by well-meaning community members and attention-seeking individuals. The tip line received dozens of calls daily, each requiring follow-up investigation that rarely produced useful information. One particularly promising lead involved a camper who claimed to have seen 3 people matching the victims' descriptions near a remote Forest Service road on June 15, the day after they disappeared. The witness seemed credible and provided specific details about clothing and behavior that aligned with known facts. Detective Manning spent 2 days investigating this sighting, interviewing the witness multiple times, and searching the reported location with tracking dogs. The effort ultimately proved fruitless when the witness admitted uncertainty about the date and acknowledged that the people he'd seen might have been an entirely different hiking group. Similar dead ends plagued the investigation throughout the summer. Psychics offered their services, amateur detectives proposed elaborate theories, and online forums generated countless speculation about everything from alien abduction to government conspiracies. Each lead, no matter how unlikely, required serious investigation because the alternative, missing something crucial, was unacceptable to the families and law enforcement alike. By August 2008, the active search phase had officially transitioned to a cold case investigation. Regular helicopter flights continued, and ground teams still responded to credible tips, but the daily coordination center at the ranger station was closed. The case files filled 3 large storage boxes, containing hundreds of photographs, witness statements, evidence logs, and search reports. Detective Manning reviewed them regularly, hoping fresh eyes might reveal connections she'd missed. As autumn approached and the first snow began appearing on the higher peaks, the window for finding the missing hikers alive had essentially closed. The investigation would continue, but everyone involved understood they were now looking for answers rather than survivors. The families, however, refused to accept this reality. Their daily vigils continued. Their hope remained unshaken, and their determination to find their loved ones burned as brightly as ever. The autumn of 2008 brought the first snow to the Bitterroot Mountains, and a crushing acceptance that Mark, Daniel, and Emily were not coming home alive. As temperatures dropped and search teams suspended regular operations due to dangerous conditions, the 3 families faced the devastating transition from active rescue efforts to indefinite waiting. Emily Patterson established a ritual that would define her life for the next 4 years. Every evening, at sunset, she climbed the steps to her front porch and switched on the antique lantern that had belonged to her grandmother. The soft yellow glow pierced the growing darkness, visible to anyone traveling down the rural road past her farmhouse. As long as that light burns, Emily isn't forgotten, Carol explained to concerned neighbors who worried about her obsessive nightly routine. She promised she'd be back for dinner. I'm still waiting. The lantern became a beacon not just for Emily, but for the entire community's refusal to give up hope. Other families began leaving porch lights on throughout the night, creating a constellation of illumination across the valley that spoke to collective grief and determination. Mark Chen's father, David, channeled his anguish into relentless advocacy for continued search efforts. He met weekly with Detective Manning, reviewed case files repeatedly, and maintained detailed maps marking every location that had been searched. His home office transformed into an amateur command center, with topographical charts covering the walls and evidence timelines stretching across multiple bulletin boards. I'm a civil engineer, David explained to anyone who questioned his methodical approach. I solve problems by understanding systems. My son is somewhere in those mountains, and systematic analysis will find him. Daniel Rodriguez's family struggled differently with the ambiguity. His parents, Miguel and Rosa, had immigrated from Mexico decades earlier and built successful lives through hard work and determination. The complete absence of answers challenged their fundamental belief that persistence and effort could overcome any obstacle. Rosa developed severe anxiety that made leaving her house increasingly difficult. The sound of helicopters, once comforting because it meant searching continued, now triggered panic attacks that left her gasping for breath. Miguel took extended leave from his construction job to care for his wife and coordinate with investigators. The financial strain on all 3 families was devastating. Travel expenses, time off work, and the cost of hiring private investigators consumed life savings quickly. David Chen mortgaged his house to fund additional ground-penetrating radar searches in the mining district. The Pattersons sold Carol's late mother's jewelry to pay for extended helicopter reconnaissance flights. Local businesses and community organizations organized fundraisers throughout the fall and winter. The Hamilton Community Center hosted monthly benefit dinners, with all proceeds supporting continued search efforts and family expenses. Local radio station KBGA ran weekly updates and encouraged listeners to donate to the Bring Them Home Fund established at First Security Bank. But charity, however well-intentioned, couldn't address the deeper psychological toll of uncertainty. Marriage counselor Dr. Jennifer Walsh, sister to evidence technician Sarah Walsh, provided free services to all 3 families as they struggled to maintain relationships under extreme stress. Ambiguous loss is one of the most difficult forms of grief, Dr. Walsh explained during a family support group meeting. Without closure, the mind can't complete its natural mourning process. Families get stuck in a state of perpetual anxiety and false hope. The support group met weekly at the First Baptist Church, bringing together not just the Chen, Rodriguez, and Patterson families, but other community members who had experienced similar losses over the years. Montana's wilderness had claimed numerous lives, and the emotional scars ran deep through multiple generations. As winter deepened and search operations became impossible due to snow cover, the families faced their most challenging period yet. The daily structure provided by active searching disappeared, leaving empty hours to fill with worry and what-if scenarios. Carol Patterson spent increasing amounts of time in Emily's childhood bedroom, which she had preserved exactly as her daughter left it. Nursing textbooks lay open on the desk, clinical rotation schedules remained taped to the mirror, and the scent of Emily's favorite vanilla lotion still lingered on her pillowcase. David Chen immersed himself in geological surveys and historical mining records, convinced that understanding the area's subsurface structure would reveal where his son might be found. His technical expertise became both a blessing and a curse. He understood the search challenges better than most, but that knowledge made the possibilities even more terrifying. The Rodriguez family found solace in their faith community, attending daily mass and organizing prayer circles that drew dozens of participants. Father Martinez became a crucial source of strength, helping them navigate the theological questions raised by such inexplicable tragedy. As 2009 arrived without answers, all three families faced a stark reality. Their loved ones had been missing for more than 6 months. Winter conditions made searching impossible, and investigators had no promising leads to pursue. Yet the porch lights continued burning every night, casting their hopeful glow across the snow-covered valley. The families had learned to live with uncertainty, but they refused to live without hope. The years 2009 through 2011 stretched endlessly for the families and community, marked by the crushing weight of unanswered questions and the slow adaptation to a new normal defined by absence. The case that had once commanded headlines and mobilized hundreds of volunteers gradually faded from public attention, leaving behind a community forever changed by tragedy and uncertainty. The Bitterroot Valley's relationship with its wilderness areas transformed dramatically during this period. Parents who had once encouraged their children to explore the mountains now imposed strict boundaries and supervision requirements. Local hiking clubs saw membership decline as families chose safer recreational activities closer to populated areas. Tourism, crucial to the region's economy, suffered measurable impacts. The Lost Horse trailhead that had once attracted dozens of hikers weekly now sat largely empty, its parking area overgrown with weeds and its information kiosk weathered by neglect. Trail maintenance decreased as fewer people used the area, creating a cycle of deterioration that made the wilderness feel more forbidding than inviting. High school students, who had grown up with stories of the disappearance, carried the weight of those unsolved mysteries into their daily lives. Graduation ceremonies included empty chairs and memorial scholarships in honor of the 3 missing hikers, while senior class trips avoided wilderness destinations that might remind everyone of what had happened. Local businesses struggled to balance commemorating the missing with moving forward economically. Henderson's General Store maintained a bulletin board with photos of Mark, Daniel, and Emily, but the tourist merchandise gradually shifted away from promoting wilderness adventures towards safer cultural attractions. The annual memorial hike, organized each June 14th to mark the anniversary of the disappearance, became a complex community ritual. Hundreds participated in the early years, but attendance gradually declined as the immediate grief evolved into a more manageable but permanent sadness. Pastor Warren observed the community's psychological evolution during his weekly sermons. "We've learned to carry sorrow alongside hope," he reflected during the 3rd anniversary service. "These mountains that we love have also broken our hearts, but we continue to call this place home." The 3 families developed different coping mechanisms as the investigation remained stalled. David Chen transformed his technical expertise into advocacy for improved wilderness safety regulations, working with state legislators to enhance search and rescue capabilities and emergency communication systems. His efforts resulted in the installation of emergency call boxes at major trailheads throughout western Montana, a tangible legacy that might prevent other families from experiencing similar anguish. The boxes, powered by solar panels and connected to satellite communication networks, provided direct contact with emergency services from previously unreachable locations. Emily Patterson's nightly lantern ritual evolved into a broader memorial practice. She began maintaining a small garden beside her porch, planting Emily's favorite flowers each spring and tending them throughout the growing season. The garden became a pilgrimage site for community members who wanted to honor the missing hiker's memory. The garden's design incorporated plants native to the Bear Creek Canyon area, lupines, Indian paintbrush, and bear grass, that bloomed in cycles throughout the summer. Each plant selection carried symbolic meaning, representing hope, remembrance, and the enduring connection between the missing hikers and their beloved wilderness. Miguel and Rosa Rodriguez channeled their grief into supporting other families facing similar tragedies. They established a network connecting families of missing persons throughout the Mountain West, sharing resources and emotional support across vast geographical distances. Their organization, Families United in Hope, provided practical assistance with media relations, volunteer coordination, and advocacy for improved investigation resources. The group's annual conference drew participants from across the region, creating a community of people who understood the unique challenges of ambiguous loss. Detective Manning, promoted to lieutenant in 2010, maintained the case files and continued investigating occasional tips, but acknowledged that without new evidence or technological breakthroughs, the investigation had reached its limits. The case remained officially open, but active investigation had essentially ceased. The State Crime Laboratory had completed its analysis of the fabric sample and confirmed it came from a jacket matching the brand and color of Daniel's hiking gear. But without additional context, this evidence merely confirmed what investigators already suspected. The three had traveled beyond the main trail system before vanishing. Local wildlife patterns had gradually returned to normal in the Bear Creek Canyon area, with bear and elk populations showing no unusual behaviors that might indicate the presence of human remains. Annual wildlife surveys conducted by Montana Fish, Wildlife and Ours documented healthy ecosystem function, suggesting that whatever had happened to the missing hikers hadn't disrupted the area's natural balance. As 2011 progressed, the case appeared destined to join Montana's long list of unsolved wilderness disappearances. The families continued their vigils and advocacy efforts, but even they began to acknowledge privately that answers might never come. The community had learned to live with mystery, to carry sadness without being crushed by it, and to honor memory while moving forward with daily life. But everyone understood that the case had permanently altered their relationship with the wilderness they called home. None could imagine that within a year, a routine patrol would uncover evidence that would shatter their hard-won acceptance and rewrite everything they thought they knew about those 3 lost days in June. The morning of July 23, 2012, began like countless others for Forest Service Rangers Pete Morrison and Kevin Walsh as they conducted their weekly patrol of the Bear Creek Canyon backcountry. 4 years had passed since the disappearance, and the remote mining district had returned to its natural silence, disturbed only by occasional wildlife researchers and the persistent hope of 3 families who refused to give up. Morrison and Walsh were checking on the stability of known mine shafts, a routine safety inspection required after spring flooding had shifted soil and debris throughout the canyon system. The summer had been unusually dry, lowering creek levels and exposing geological features that were typically underwater during normal runoff seasons. At approximately 10:30 a.m., as they approached an area roughly 3 miles from the main trailhead, both rangers heard something that stopped them in their tracks, a rhythmic metallic banging, echoing from deep within the forest, like someone striking metal against stone in deliberate measured intervals. "You hear that?" Morrison asked, raising his hand to signal silence. The sound repeated every few seconds, consistent in tempo and volume, suggesting it wasn't caused by wind or settling debris. Following the sound deeper into the mining district, they navigated through dense undergrowth and around massive granite boulders that had tumbled from the canyon walls decades earlier. The metallic ringing grew louder as they approached a cluster of deteriorated mining structures that hadn't been thoroughly searched since the initial investigation. What they discovered next would haunt both men for the rest of their lives. Behind a collapsed wooden frame and partially concealed by 4 years of vegetation growth, they found the entrance to a mine shaft that didn't appear on any of their maps or historical surveys. The opening, barely 3 feet wide and secured with a heavy steel door that hung askew on rusted hinges, was the source of the mysterious sound. Wind flowing through the shaft created a natural bellows effect, causing the loose door to strike repeatedly against the metal frame with each gust. Morrison immediately radioed their location to the ranger station, while Walsh photographed the scene with his digital camera. The shaft entrance showed clear signs of recent disturbance: scratched metal around the locking mechanism, disturbed soil, and most significantly, a heavy chain that had been cut rather than simply broken by weather or time. "Base, this is Ranger Morrison," he reported over the radio, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "We've got a previously unknown mine shaft at coordinates 46. The entrance shows signs of tampering, and we're hearing sounds from inside that need immediate investigation." Within 2 hours, the Bear Creek Canyon area was once again swarming with emergency personnel. Detective Manning, now Lieutenant Manning, arrived with a full technical rescue team, evidence collection specialists, and medical examiner staff. The families were notified but asked to remain away from the scene until investigators could assess what they'd found. The shaft descended approximately 45 feet into solid granite, before opening into a natural cave system that extended laterally into the mountain. Technical rescue specialist Jennifer Cole, the same expert who had searched other shafts during the original investigation, prepared for what everyone hoped would be the final descent in this case. Cole's initial assessment via remote camera revealed a chamber approximately 20 feet wide and 30 feet long, with evidence of both historical mining equipment and much more recent human activity. Her headlamp illuminated scattered personal belongings, clothing fragments, and what appeared to be human remains.
"I've got multiple items down here that match descriptions from the missing persons case," Cole radioed to the surface team. "Backpack with university patches, outdoor gear consistent with the time period, and we're going to need the medical examiner immediately." The recovery operation took 6 hours of painstaking work. Each item was photographed in place, carefully extracted, and immediately secured as evidence. The remains, while significantly deteriorated after 4 years, were clearly human and appeared to represent 3 individuals based on preliminary bone analysis. Among the recovered items were Daniel's distinctive GPS device, Emily's nursing school identification badge, and Mark's geology field notebook, personal effects that had been specifically described by family members during the original investigation. But the most shocking discovery was evidence suggesting the 3 hadn't died accidentally. The mine shaft entrance showed clear signs of forced entry from the outside, and the positioning of remains within the chamber indicated they had been placed there deliberately, rather than falling or crawling and seeking shelter. Advanced DNA analysis, impossible with 208 technology, but routine by 2012, would be required to confirm the identities of the recovered remains. But the personal effects left little doubt that after 4 years of searching, Mark Chen, Daniel Rodriguez, and Emily Patterson had finally been found. As news of the discovery spread throughout the community, the mixture of relief and horror was overwhelming. The families would finally have answers and closure, but those answers would prove far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The forensic analysis that followed the mine shaft discovery transformed what everyone had assumed was a tragic wilderness accident into one of the most shocking criminal cases in Montana's history. The state crime laboratory, now equipped with advanced DNA sequencing technology, unavailable during the original investigation, began processing evidence that would ultimately expose a killer who had been hiding in plain sight for 4 years. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, Montana's chief forensic pathologist, conducted the remains analysis with meticulous attention to detail. The skeletal remains, while significantly deteriorated due to time and environmental conditions, told a clear story of violence rather than accidental death.
These individuals didn't die from exposure, wildlife encounters, or mining accidents. Dr. Hawkins reported to the investigation team. The trauma patterns, on multiple bones, are consistent with blunt force injuries inflicted by another person. This is definitely a homicide case. The most critical evidence came from synthetic restraint materials found with the remains. Pieces of zip ties, heavy-duty plastic restraints commonly used in construction and industrial applications, were discovered around the wrist bones of all three victims. In 2012, DNA extraction from such materials was possible using techniques that hadn't existed 4 years earlier. Forensic technician Michael Santos processed the restraint materials using advanced STR, short tandem repeat DNA analysis, a method that could identify genetic profiles from minimal biological samples. The process took weeks, but the results were definitive and shocking. With the DNA profile extracted from the zip ties matched a sample already in the Montana State database, but not from any previous criminal investigation. The match came from an elimination sample provided voluntarily during the original investigation by Harry Brennan, a 54-year-old local business owner who had joined community search efforts and provided DNA to help distinguish searcher contamination from victim evidence. Lieutenant Manning stared at the laboratory report in disbelief. Harry Brennan owned Brennan's Hardware and Outdoor Supplies in Hamilton, a popular store that catered to hikers, hunters, and outdoor enthusiasts throughout the Bitterroot Valley. He had been one of the most helpful community volunteers during the original search, providing equipment, local knowledge, and even participating in ground search teams. This can't be right. Manning's first reaction reflected everyone's initial response. Harry Brennan has been helping us for 4 years. He organized fundraisers, donated supplies, and comforted the families. There has to be a mistake, but additional forensic analysis confirmed the impossible truth. DNA evidence from the crime scene matched Brennan's genetic profile with a probability of 1 in. More disturbing, investigators realized that Brennan's extensive knowledge of the local mining district, knowledge he had shared freely with searchers, had been used to conceal evidence of his crimes. Detective Rick Hawkins, Manning's longtime partner, began reconstructing the case timeline with this new information. Brennan had been among the first civilians to volunteer for search efforts on June 5. He'd recommended specific areas to focus on, provided detailed maps of mining locations, and even suggested which shafts were too dangerous for thorough investigation. He was directing us away from the crime scene while pretending to help. Hawkins realized as he reviewed 4 years of case notes. Every suggestion he made steered searchers toward areas where he knew we wouldn't find anything. A comprehensive background investigation revealed disturbing patterns in Brennan's behavior that had been overlooked during the original case. Store security cameras from his business showed that he had sold zip ties, duct tape, and other restraint materials during the week before the disappearance, purchases that seemed routine for a hardware store, but took on sinister significance in light of the forensic evidence. Financial records indicated that Brennan had been struggling with significant debt problems in 2008, including overdue business loans and personal credit issues. His hardware store was facing competition from big box retailers, and his marriage was under severe strain due to financial pressures. But the most chilling discovery came from Brennan's computer, seized during a search warrant execution. His internet browsing history from spring 2008 included repeated searches for information about the missing hikers, their families, and details about the investigation that hadn't been released to the public. More disturbing were earlier searches related to wilderness survival, body decomposition rates, and mining history in western Montana. The search patterns suggested months of planning and research before the actual crimes occurred. Store employees, interviewed under new circumstances, recalled that Brennan had seemed unusually interested in the 3 young hikers when they visited his store during the week before their disappearance. Security footage from June 12, 2008, showed Mark, Daniel, and Emily purchasing trail maps and emergency supplies, while Brennan personally assisted them. He spent a long time talking to them about local trails, recalled employee Susan Martinez. I thought he was just being helpful, like always. Now it gives me chills to think about what he might have been planning. The evidence painted a picture of a methodical predator who had used his position of trust and local expertise to target, kill, and conceal his crimes, while simultaneously helping to search for his own victims. Within 48 hours of receiving the DNA results, law enforcement began preparing arrest warrants, while conducting discreet surveillance to ensure Brennan didn't flee or destroy additional evidence. The pre-dawn hours of August 15, 2012, shattered the quiet of Harold Brennan's rural farmhouse, as a coordinated law enforcement team executed arrest and search warrants simultaneously. FBI agents, working in conjunction with local authorities, due to the federal jurisdiction over crimes in national forest areas, had spent weeks planning the operation to ensure no evidence could be destroyed or concealed. At 5:47 a.m., as Brennan performed his morning routine of feeding livestock and checking fence lines, FBI Special Agent Maria Santos and Lieutenant Manning approached him in his barn with weapons drawn but not threatening. The arrest needed to be conducted carefully. Brennan's 4 years of freedom had allowed him to establish deep community roots and claim innocence that many still believed. Harold Brennan, you're under arrest for the murders of Mark Chen, Daniel Rodriguez, and Emily Patterson, Santos announced while reading him his constitutional rights. Brennan's reaction was everything investigators had expected from a man who had maintained an elaborate deception for 4 years: shock, denial, and apparent confusion. "This is insane," Brennan protested as handcuffs were applied. "I've been helping you people search for those kids since day one. How can you think I had anything to do with this?" His performance was convincing enough that even experienced investigators might have questioned the evidence, if not for the definitive DNA matches and mounting circumstantial proof. Brennan's ability to appear genuinely surprised and hurt by the accusations demonstrated the manipulative skills that had allowed him to evade suspicion for so long. The search of Brennan's property revealed a methodical killer who had been hiding in plain sight while actively participating in efforts to find his victims. In his workshop, investigators discovered additional zip ties identical to those used to restrain the victims, along with detailed topographical maps marking mining locations throughout the Bear Creek Canyon area. Most disturbing was a collection of newspaper clippings, printed internet articles, and photographs related to the missing hikers case that Brennan had been maintaining since. The materials were organized chronologically and included notes in Brennan's handwriting that revealed intimate knowledge of investigation details not released to the public. Among his personal belongings, investigators found souvenirs from the victims, Emily's university class ring, Daniel's distinctive hiking compass, and Mark's geology field guide. These items, hidden in a locked box in Brennan's bedroom, had been kept as trophies while the families grieved their missing loved ones. The search also uncovered evidence of careful planning and preparation. Brennan had maintained detailed records of hiking patterns in the area, noting which trails were most popular on which days of the week and which locations offered the most isolation from potential witnesses. His computer contained extensive research into forensic science techniques, body decomposition, and criminal investigation procedures. The browsing history suggested he had been educating himself about evidence collection methods and DNA analysis capabilities, knowledge he had used to attempt concealing his crimes. As news of the arrest spread throughout the Bitterroot Valley, the community's reaction was a mixture of relief, horror, and betrayal that would take years to fully process. Brennan had been a fixture in Hamilton for over 2 decades, serving on the volunteer fire department, coaching youth baseball, and organizing annual community fundraisers. "I trusted him to sell me safety equipment for my own kids," said longtime customer Robert Chen, no relation to victim Mark Chen. "He helped me pick out hiking gear for my daughter's scout trips. The thought that he could hurt those young people while pretending to help find them, it makes me physically sick." The First Baptist Church, which had served as a coordination center for volunteer search efforts, held an emergency meeting to help community members process the shocking revelation. Pastor Warren struggled to find words that could address the betrayal and deception that cut to the heart of rural Montana's social fabric. "Evil sometimes wears a familiar face," Pastor Warren told the packed congregation. "We've been grieving for 4 years, but now we also have to grieve for our lost sense of trust and safety." Local businesses faced the difficult challenge of continuing to operate while processing the knowledge that they had been interacting regularly with a killer. Henderson's General Store, located just blocks from Brennan's hardware shop, saw several employees request counseling services to deal with their shock and fear. The families of the victims experienced complex emotions upon learning that someone they had trusted and interacted with regularly had been responsible for their loved ones' deaths. Carol Patterson's first reaction was rage, so intense it frightened her. "He comforted me," she told investigators during a victim impact interview. "He brought flowers to our vigils, donated money to our search funds, and looked me in the eye while expressing sympathy for my loss, all while knowing exactly what he had done to Emily." The Rodriguez family struggled with the realization that their regular interactions with Brennan at church services and community events had put them in proximity to their son's killer, while they mourned his disappearance. As Brennan was transferred to federal custody to await trial, the community began the difficult process of reevaluating everything they thought they knew about the past 4 years, and coming to terms with how thoroughly they had been deceived. The federal courthouse in Missoula became the focal point for western Montana's quest for justice as Harold Brennan's trial began on March. Nearly 6 years after the murders, families and community members finally had the opportunity to confront the man who had terrorized them while hiding behind a mask of helpfulness and concern. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, no relation to the local Walsh family involved in the investigation, presented a methodical case that painted Brennan as a calculating predator who had exploited his position of community trust to target, kill, and conceal his crimes. The defendant didn't just murder 3 innocent young people, Walsh told the jury during opening statements. He compounded that evil by inserting himself into the investigation, manipulating grieving families, and directing search efforts away from evidence he knew would expose his guilt. The prosecution's case relied heavily on the DNA evidence linking Brennan to the restraint materials, but also included circumstantial evidence that created a compelling timeline of premeditation and deception. Store security footage showed the victims purchasing supplies from Brennan's hardware store days before their disappearance, while his computer records revealed months of research into local mining locations and forensic science techniques. Forensic pathologist Dr. Patricia Hawkins provided detailed testimony about the victims' cause of death, explaining that all 3 had died from blunt force trauma consistent with being struck repeatedly by a heavy object. The positioning of their remains within the mine shaft indicated they had been placed there after death, ruling out any possibility of accidental death or self-defense scenarios. The defense, led by experienced criminal attorney Robert Martinez, attempted to argue that the DNA evidence could have been planted or contaminated during the 4-year period between the murders and the discovery of remains. Martinez suggested that Brennan's participation in search efforts could have resulted in innocent transfer of genetic material to crime scene evidence. "My client spent 4 years genuinely trying to help find these missing young people," Martinez argued. His presence at search sites and his contact with investigation materials provides reasonable explanations for any DNA evidence that doesn't involve murder. But the prosecution systematically dismantled these arguments by demonstrating the specific nature of DNA transfer to the restraint materials. Expert testimony explained that genetic material found its way onto the zip ties during the commission of the crimes, not through secondary contact during search operations. The most emotional testimony came from family members who described their interactions with Brennan during the 4 years he had maintained his deception. Carol Patterson's testimony about Brennan's attendance at memorial vigils and his donations to search funds left several jury members visibly shaken. "He would put his hand on my shoulder and tell me to keep hoping," Patterson testified through tears. He said Emily was a strong girl who wouldn't give up easily, all while knowing he had killed her and hidden her body in that mine shaft. David Chen described how Brennan had provided detailed maps and recommendations for search areas, always steering efforts away from the location where he had concealed the victims. "He was our expert on local mining history," Chen testified. "We trusted his knowledge completely, never realizing he was using it to protect himself." Miguel Rodriguez's testimony required translation services, as his English deteriorated under the emotional stress of confronting his son's killer. 4 years. he repeated in Spanish and English. For 4 years we prayed for Daniel's safe return while his killer sat in our church, ate at our community dinners, and pretended to share our grief. The trial's most dramatic moment came when Brennan himself took the stand in his own defense. His attorney had advised against it, but Brennan insisted on maintaining his innocence and attempting to explain away the evidence. His testimony revealed the manipulative personality that had allowed him to deceive an entire community for years. Brennan expressed sympathy for the families while denying any involvement in the murders, suggesting that the real killer remained unknown and unpunished. But under cross-examination, his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Prosecutor Walsh methodically challenged his explanations for the DNA evidence, his detailed knowledge of the crime scene, and his suspicious behavior patterns during the investigation. "You knew exactly where those bodies were for 4 years," Walsh confronted him directly. "Every time you comforted these families, every time you joined a search party, every time you attended a memorial service, you knew those 3 young people were dead in that mine shaft because you put them there." Brennan's responses became increasingly erratic and defensive, revealing glimpses of the rage and entitlement that had motivated his crimes. His final outburst claiming the victims had deserved what happened because they had been disrespectful to local wilderness areas, provided the jury with clear insight into his true character. After 6 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts: 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Brennan to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again threaten innocent people or deceive grieving families. As the gavel fell, family members embraced while community members who had packed the courtroom gallery wept with relief that justice had finally been served. The Montana hiker's case stands as both a profound tragedy and a testament to the power of persistence in the pursuit of justice. For 6 years, the Bitterroot Valley community lived with the shadow of unexplained loss, never suspecting that the killer walked among them, offering comfort while concealing unthinkable crimes. Harold Brennan's deception cut deeper than murder. He weaponized the very compassion and trust that define small communities, using people's grief as a shield for his guilt. His participation in search efforts, his donations to victim funds, and his presence at memorial services represented a level of psychological manipulation that left lasting scars on everyone who had trusted him. The family's unwavering hope proved crucial to eventual justice. Carol Patterson's nightly lantern ritual, David Chen's methodical advocacy, and the Rodriguez family's community organizing created a foundation of persistent attention that kept the case alive when it might otherwise have been forgotten. Advanced DNA technology ultimately provided the breakthrough that solved the case, but human determination made that technology possible. Without the family's refusal to accept uncertainty, without the community's continued support, and without investigators who maintained open case files for years, critical evidence might never have been properly analyzed. The case transformed Montana's approach to wilderness safety and criminal investigation. Emergency communication systems were upgraded, search protocols were revised, and community awareness programs were established to help people recognize manipulation and deception. Most importantly, the tragedy reinforced an essential truth about justice. It may be delayed by circumstance, technology, or even evil, but it is never denied when people refuse to surrender hope. In the end, love proved stronger than deception, persistence more powerful than manipulation, and truth more enduring than even the most carefully constructed lies. The echo in the mountains finally revealed its secret, and 3 young lives were given the justice they deserved.